It offers a deeper analysis from different sources, and it gives a space, I think, for people's voices to be heard.
It's been almost 1 month since Congress approved President Bush's $700 billion bailout plan, and markets worldwide are still in freefall. Unemployment continues to rise, and the foreclosure crisis is deepening. Joining us from his office in New York City to discuss the situation is Danny Schechter. Danny's editor of MediaChannel.org and author of Plunder, Investigating Our Economic Calamity and the Subprime Scandal. Welcome, Danny.
Hey, great to be with you. You know, you'll notice that suddenly the entire official government position has changed. Initially, it was, we have to do this deal. We have to do it right now. In fact, in 7 days, the same amount of time it took God to create the universe. And they got it through Congress. And Congress authorized $700 billion to buy up bad mortgages from various banks. President Bush said this must be done immediately to stop the crisis from getting worse. Now Bush is saying, in the long run, we're going to solve this problem. He's not giving any dates, any times. He's just announced a global summit in Washington with 20 different countries coming, which he is hosting, which probably means he'll be serving refreshments. So that's coming up right after 11 days after the election. Today, the ILO, the International Labor Organization, projected 20 million people worldwide being unemployed as a result of this crisis. The Food and Agricultural Organization says 117 million people may slip into hunger as a result of this because of the effect on food prices and the like. So the crisis is much deeper than we really sense here in the United States. What we're watching are markets going up and down. The Dow is up today. Oops, there it goes. There it's down now. This type of coverage, but it doesn't really explain the fundamental problems that we're dealing with here and the reasons that this isn't working. You know, there are papers like the Financial Times out of London, which does a fairly good job. The Wall Street Journal does have some interesting coverage. But in the mass media outlets, I think they're really kind of behind on the story. Today, for example, the New York Times ran a front-page interview with Henry Paulson, the Treasury Secretary, analyzing what he did 2 weeks ago, okay? Like 2 weeks later, we're finding out that Paulson himself is saying, gee, maybe I should have looked into this subprime lending crisis earlier, he admits. But then he goes on to say, well, even if I had, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Alan Greenspan, meanwhile, is saying he is shocked, just shocked by this crisis. He told Congress today that he himself believed that we didn't need regulation, and he was wrong. So we're inching towards a mea culpa from people in high places, but they've yet to apologize. They've yet to really account for how their own policies contributed to the deepening of this crisis.
The media has, that I've observed, seems not to want to deal with one of the underlying causes of the problem, which is purchasing power based on debt and not on wages. And nobody wants to actually take up the question of why are wages so low? What have you seen on this?
Well, there has been some reporting on, the growing gap between CEO pay and ordinary people's pay. Like it was I think 300 to 1. Now it's like 500 to 1. These trends of deepening inequality really define the story, but they have not been defined in the story. And that's one of the problems that we've had. We also have a growing number of people in the industry who are also bailing out, not bailing out with money, but bailing out with their lives. I love this little quote here from a guy named Alan Lahi, who is running a big hedge fund. And he says, he was referencing a Wall Street Journal article where a guy in the hedge fund business said, I hate it. And this guy says, I couldn't agree more with that statement. I was in this game for the money, the low-hanging fruit, i.e. idiots whose parents paid for prep school, Yale, and then Harvard MBA was there for the taking. These people who were often truly not worthy of the education they received or supposedly received, rose to the top of companies like AIG, Bear Stearns, and Lehman Brothers, and all levels of our government. All this behavior, supporting what he calls the aristocracy, only ended up making it easier for me to find people stupid enough to take the other side of my trades. God bless America, he said, I quit. So you're finding people who are losing confidence, the very people who you assume would have more confidence now that the government is acting, they just want to get out. They don't think anything is working. This is a disaster as far as they're concerned. And I think this is the story I tell in my book, Plunder. I started tracking this crisis after I did my film In Debt We Trust, the response to which was, "You are an alarmist, Danny. You are exaggerating the problem. It's not as bad as you say. We'll get through this okay." And then last August, the markets melted down. The government started cutting interest rates 8 times now, injecting hundreds of billions of dollars into banks and other financial instruments and institutions. And guess what? Nothing has been, quote, fixed. The public, meanwhile, has been led to believe that the government is fixing it, that the bailout will fix it, that the various measures being taken will fix it. And every time they try something, they recognize it's not working, and then they try something else. So it's really like throwing stuff up on the wall, throwing basically darts up on the wall and seeing what sticks and what doesn't stick.
Well, Doug,
this is not something to inspire confidence, is it?
Yeah, Doug Hedenwood once made a good point. I thought this: when a government needs money, it has two choices: borrow it or tax it. And they're absolutely alert, or print it. But eventually, when you print it, something's going to have to back the printing, and then you're going to go back to borrowing or
what's happening? What's happening is debt is out of control. I'm reading think tank reports out of Europe that are saying the United States is going to default on its debt come next year, that there's no way that we can pay off this debt. Debt is just climbing rapidly. Inflation is climbing rapidly as well. So every measure that they take has an unanticipated consequence, which is often moving in the other direction. And that's what we have to analyze and understand this. And I wish more progressives would be as concerned about this issue as they are about Sarah Palin's, budget for her clothing. This is much more serious and will affect us all. Already, layoffs are starting in municipal services, cops, education. People are getting cut back in healthcare institutions. This is going to affect every single person in this country.
Well, in the next segment of our interview, let's talk about what's happening on the ground as foreclosures are taking place. And there's a lot of conversation about whether banks have to find some way to leave people in the houses without a complete collapse of the housing market. On the other hand, there are some instances of resistance against foreclosures. So please join us for the second part of our interview with Danny Schechter.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington is a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.